After being sentenced to life in prison, a woman is given the choice of becoming an assassin or being killed when her captors face fake her death. So that's the story of La Femme Nikita. And this time we're talking about that with, of course, I'm John Chang and with Dan Edmonds.
Hello once again.
To me, like one of the interesting parts about all this is I think one of the first movies I know of that like really kind of femininity as something that's more positive in an age. I think a lot of movies now almost like kind of really suppress it, unless it's like kind of the opposite where they're sexual objects and that kind of thing and stuff. So here we have a movie that kind of really not only kind of talks about femininity as a strength and asset, but really just kind of highlights this woman that uses that for as almost like a superpower, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those movies that you can and kind of think, well, yeah, this is kind of cool. It's powerful feminine lead, kicking ass, yay, women, femininity. But I think I don't know. When you dig a little bit deeper into it, I find it a little bit insidious, to be honest with you. And for me, it's kind of, and I can probably make this point best by talking about Beauty and the Beast, the classic Disney princess movie. Because in that movie, which is again also kind of weirdly held up as a feminist kind of Belle as a feminist character. But if you can bear with me a little minute here. So Beauty and the Beast, Belle rejects the good-looking guy and then gets sort of imprisoned by this beast. And somehow through some kind of Stockholm syndrome starts to fall in love with him, even though the relationship is completely exploitative in that he's holding a prisoner and I can't remember if he's going to kill her father or something like this. It's,
right.
And he's like this obviously kind of less than desirable looking beast style character. Now that spawned quite a lot of similar themed stories in French cinema.
Yeah,
you can look at things like Jean de Florette, Manon de Sauce. Again, it's like you have the less than desirable older man courting the young, beautiful woman. So this is definitely like a theme through French story making and cinema, which of course works out fabulously for older, ugly French men. But the thing with Nikita is it kind of keeps in that tradition, but flips it a little bit. Because now, rather than having the older man portrayed as the beast, we see Nikita as this wild, almost kind of feral woman,
right,
in a kind of underclass of society, who is uncontrollable and then visually put in a cage in animal print. So she's now kind of like the beast that has to be tamed by society. But again, we've got like this domineering kind of father figure of an organization this time. It's more kind of conspiratorial, coming in and reshaping her, how she behaves, how she looks, which actually kind of happens in Beauty and the Beast as well. Belle is seen as this character who goes off and starts reading all the books in the diary like a good studious girl, and yeah, you've basically got a very similar kind of theme in that you have this sort of overarching exploitative father figure, controlling this young, beautiful woman, but she has to be beautiful, of course, as well. It's like all of these stories involve, slightly androgynous, rather skinny women fighting against patriarchal organizations. And I mean, Luc Besson is clearly, and of course there's the final twist that she then fights against the patriarchal organization, which kind of gives it some, I mean, that's where I guess you get your kind of feminist theme, perhaps, in that, the organization turns on her and and she has to kind of fight back against it. All right, cool. But why does Luc Besson keep making movies about this over and over again? You know, The Fifth Element, Colombiana, there's most of Joss Whedon's stuff, Buffy, Alias, Firefly, Salt, Hannah. I mean, they're just the same movie over and over again with very, very similar themes.
Yeah, and for me, it's interesting how you know, what you're saying about the father figure and stuff, because the parallel I drew is definitely, you know, between Pygmalion and My Fair Lady, where, you know, you have like kind of the street urchin that basically needs refinement and stuff by, like you said, a father figure. I'll tell you, like, kind of, it's in some ways like kind of, you know, a very much a male fantasy kind of thing and stuff.
Luc Besson's.
Clearly, like you said, and at the same time, though, it's interesting how in this day and age, we do have a lot more women that have really been protesting this and like speaking up about how, like, this is just like, you know, that they're very much tired of this kind of trope, if you will, that because not only, you know, as the movies you mentioned and stuff, but it's even in other ones that like are seemingly harmless in some ways, but Pretty Woman, another case in point, like kind of, you know, like she's this, a streetwise, you know, kind of gritty, you know, kind of woman that has really like no refinement. And then, you know, she's, you know, because of this Prince Charming is then basically polished off and kind of, you know, refined to be like kind of this, you know, princess and stuff. And, but what it really comes down to is this kind of the idea that like, you know, these women characters need rescuing and kind of, you know, being kind of fixed and stuff, which, you know, on the flip side, you know, the ironic part is that like a lot of women in relationships have the opposite fantasy of like, you know, fixing males and stuff, which is why they end up in these abusive relationships that they stay stuck in as well. So I guess what I'm almost kind of doing in a way is kind of playing the devil's advocate that like, you know, just as much as we play these out in movies and stuff, women play it out very much in quite a few women play it out in real life as well.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing you mentioned there, the interesting sort of parallel as well is Cinderella. Because, you know, all of these ones are kind of like, you know, you take this, like you said, the street urchin, and then, you know, the Bob character is almost like the Prince Charming, who's kind of making her fit for the ball. In this case, the ball being a hit where she gets taken to a nice restaurant and has to kill someone. And, you know, she's Anne Bancroft in the remake, Point of No Return, but I want to say Jeanne Moreau is in Nikita. She's like the fairy godmother. She's the one who sort of gives her all the sort of the femininity and the ability to sort of operate in a high class sort of society. So again, there's the kind of, you know, a cassette rather than running away from a ball, she's running away from murder. So,
on the other hand, what's interesting is as well is that this is also the hero's journey, though, in that here is this person who, you know, has, you know, her ordinary world as being the streets and stuff, and like you said, she needs this kind of, you know, wizard or mentor and stuff. In this case, you know, like kind of this, you know, whether it's Jean Reno or you know, Anne Bancroft being the kind of the wise older woman that kind of, you know, basically cleans her up and stuff, along with, you know, of course, Bob, you know, kind of in the original Nikita and stuff, and the remake, we have, actually, I guess he's Bob again. One thing, you know, like we won't cover it so much about, it's interesting how in the television series, they changed the name though, like, but versus the, you know, the original remake, they kept the name the same and stuff more or less, except for, of course, Nikita, who in the remake is, I want to say Maggie, yes.
Yeah, Maggie. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think as well, the, you know, this whole thing, the way I look at it is a lot of these sort of things is, I find, you know, the killer has to be created. When it's a woman, she has to have some sort of like bad situation where society has done her wrong before and they have to kind of coerce her into being a killer. Like, if you just parallel all of these with like Jason Bourne or James Bond, you can see how many double standards there are in them. Because like James Bond never, you know, he had a, you know, they kind of allude to a troubled background, but it's not like somebody comes along and picks him up off the streets and, you know, makes him into a killer. He decides to do it because has that executive authority over his personhood. And, you know, likewise, there's no one who teaches James Bond how to dress and act in dinner and things like this. It's another thing that's kind of weird. So that, and this idea of creating your kind of female killer is something that Luc Besson does a number of times, and more, and kind of technologically in The Fifth Element, because he actually has this kind of thing where, you know, they genetically engineer the creator in that one. So, and for me, the slightly more insidious kind of part of it, with the thing that just I find disturbing in Luc Besson's, is this idea that when you first watch it, you kind of think, oh, these women are a bit unhinged. But actually what he's doing is he's creating these kind of infantile characteristics. Like if you notice in Nikita, she you know, she attacks the martial arts one, and then she does this kind of silly ballerina thing, like a little girl at a school recital or something. Matilda and Leon is very much a little girl.
Oh yeah.
Lilu is speaking in, you know, nonsense. But I mean, it's an alien language, but for all intents and purposes, he's kind of infantilizing these women, but under the guise of eccentricity. So yeah, and then he puts a gun in their hand. So it's I don't know. I just find the more I think about his movies, the more I just find them a little bit dodgy.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we definitely, you know, won't get too much into, you know, the professional, Leon the professional stuff. I have to admit though, like you said though, the stylishness though really makes it where it's kind of they're very watchable, but also like kind of where I have to admit that like I have ignored like a lot of, you know, what we're talking about because of the fact that like they're so stylish. It's seductive, I guess, in a way.
It is, yeah.
Because you know, I when I first saw Leon, which I feel like it's almost like a not quite a sequel, because he, you know, big spoiler, Jean Reno's character dies in Femme Nikita, but it's basically the same character, except now we see him in this other setting and stuff of where, you know, it's almost like in a way like maybe that if he had survived, what would his life kind of be like? And I totally bought into the idea that like, oh, he's this kind of innocent character, and you know, like people have kind of alluded to the kind of, you know, pedophile kind of relationship and stuff like that, but I never saw it that way because of probably the way it was like in a very stylized and very much like kind of that, you know, it's almost like just very much like this movie, The Femme Nikita, where you push this I believe button, you suspend a lot of belief and stuff.
Yeah, I think it kind of gets like hidden under a very kind of comic book sort of gloss to it. But I think also, you know, Jean Reno does a great job of not coming across as being a paedophile in either movie, really. He comes up as playing it, you know, just like in someone, and they make it very sort of believable in that respect. I mean, I think interestingly with The Cleaner is that was a huge influence on Tarantino. Because he got the idea from The Cleaner for Pulp Fiction from Nikita.
Right,
and then
he hires Harvey Keitel, right? Like,
and they kind of pay, I mean, they pay homage to that in Point of No Return by having Harvey Keitel as the cleaner in that. But what also I think was a big influence on Tarantino was this idea that you can connect your characters in the same universe across movies.
Okay.
Because if you have like Jean Reno as a character who's the cleaner in one and in the other, but he inexplicably dies in the one that comes before it, you know, that almost is, you know, beat for beat what's in Pulp Fiction. And then also it carries on into his whole kind of Tarantino verse where characters appear in lots of other movies. I wonder if all of that started with him, you know, being impressed with the cleaner from Nikita.
It's got to be,
because I don't remember, there wasn't much crossover between Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. There's a bit, I think, but... clearly, I think it must have had a big influence.
I mean, he openly admits he basically steals like as much as he can and stuff like that. So definitely like it's and certainly like him hiring Harvey Keitel is no coincidence. I mean, it's like kind of come on, like having pretty much the same character.
Well, no, I mean that came after Pulp Fiction though, because Pulp Fiction was 92 and Point of No Return was 93. So it's almost like
okay.
He did Harvey Keitel and Pulp Fiction based on Jean Reno.
Right.
And then Point of No Return said, oh, yeah, all right, we'll use him again in this remake of it. So,
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I pretty much could have sworn that like it just almost felt like the other way around and stuff like that because of how like you felt like that basically he took the Harvey Keitel character from Point of No Return as like kind of the template and stuff. But yeah, I didn't really realize the kind of the date and stuff like that for.
Unless I'm totally wrong. Let me just see what year Pulp Fiction was, just to make sure I'm right about that.
No, I think you're right.
No. You're right.
Oh, really?
Pulp Fiction was 1994.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, so they took, actually, I'm totally wrong. They took Harvey Keitel from Point of No Return as the cleaner for Pulp Fiction.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense because, like I said, it just kind of seemed like that it was like a template that he basically took and stuff. He gave him a kind of a creative, different name and stuff, like kind of Mr. Wolf and everything. But otherwise, like kind of just the persona and everything just seemed like it was almost like point for point.
Yeah, I mean, I think what was kind of interesting was they made the character less human in the US remake, in the Point of No Return. He's much more merciless than he is in the French version. I think Tarantino is quite a big fan of French cinema, though. There's something about his logo, A Band Apart, I think, is taken from some symbol of French cinema.
I see.
So it doesn't surprise me, but yeah. Yeah, interesting stuff.
The other kind of point I thought was really a question is, here we have like she's basically indebted to this kind of secret organization to just basically commit whatever atrocities they hire her to do and everything, which is kind of, it's never pointed out that like it's a French CIA or kind of what the organization is or like that. But for all we know, to be honest, it could actually be like just kind of like we've had that happen in some other series or whatever, that like that it's some organization posing as the government. I mean, that could very well be the case here, because it doesn't seem to have any like kind of, they seem to have no qualms about assassinating people, which as far as I know, no secret organization, if they work for the government, is going to last too long, be able to kind of have carte blanche for like killing people left and right.
Yeah. I mean, the whole kind of secret society is secret organization is kind of a bit, you really got to accept that at face value to buy into it. I mean, for one thing, there's a few problems with it from my perspective. And one is that, so the answer now to someone who's got psychological problems, has addiction problems, you just train them in martial arts and threaten them with death. That's really going to work. I mean, I can't see that working with lots of people who are sort of down on their luck and have major psychological issues. Otherwise, we would just have, lots of homeless martial arts centers around the world. There's also the other fact that why having brought her back or not killed her properly the first time, why would then the threat of death have any effect? Because surely you would say, well, you didn't kill me last time, you're probably not going to kill me this time. It's kind of like, why would you believe them, having then just created this big sort of fabricated existence for you? There's also the question of like, why would you go to all this trouble when you could probably just hire somebody who and pay them enough money, and you wouldn't have to deal with all of the other sort of psychological issues. It's it's a bit of a stretch for me.
And really, like, if you were to kind of basically have that dilemma and stuff like that, with an organization that like, clearly has no qualms about assassinating people, why would you believe that they wouldn't just in any minute just kind of and in fact, that's actually what happens with, again, spoiler alert, with Victor, that he basically like, is like the one agent like kind of starts kind of, like kind of freaking out and he just just wastes them. Like kind of, and so you wonder if there's even going to be so much of as a desk report to file for the fact that like he killed another agent and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, obviously another theme here is that of paranoia. Because you've got it's kind of a paranoid theme that there's going to be this society that randomly kills people and hires people from death row and everything else, and then keeps everyone in a state of constant sort of fear that they might be killed. But also I think sort of paranoia in general also kind of crosses over into the way relationships are viewed, because Nikita has this relationship with this guy who I can't remember his name. But Bob. So it's kind of like she's constantly keeping secrets. So there's this idea of what secrets is my
sorry,
spouse.
you're talking about the guy she's going out with and stuff.
Yeah. Sorry,
okay, right.
The actual sort of love interest in it, and there's this whole thing of what secrets is my partner keeping from me, and what's she doing in the bathroom, and who's this kind of random guy. He obviously doesn't buy into the fact that it's long lost Uncle Bob and all this kind of thing. So there's that kind of level of paranoia as well. Into the story.
It's funny how like it starts off being kind of very much like almost innocent, where and she kind of is thrilled at that. Where in both versions, it starts off being like kind of just a simple thing where she's delivering like kind of like breakfast to a room and stuff like that. The new version, of course, the remake, very quickly turned it dark. They didn't wait at all, where like having the hotel blow up and stuff. But at least in the original, you had the sense that like or you kind of almost celebrated with Nikita in the sense that like like all she has to do is basically deliver breakfast, and she's now an agent and stuff. And then it kind of leaves out like kind of like, okay, but you're actually being hired to be an assassin and stuff, and then we quickly get to that, and it's kind of like surprise, I guess, that like it seems on the surface like where Bob is being generous and sending him to a nice vacation, but in reality, it's a hit job and stuff.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Like it seems on the surface like where Bob is being generous and sending him to a nice vacation, but in reality, it's a hit job and stuff.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you'd be on pretty good grounds to sue them. I think as a government agency, I think could claim you were psychologically traumatized to begin with, and I mean, it doesn't really make much sense to me. But anyway, yeah.
And I felt like the original actress Ann Parillaud, she really pulls it off. Like she talked about like kind of different issues with the role and stuff, but she's bang on, like kind of very much like you feel like kind of she's not just acting in the sense of like where she's kind of playing along with it. She's basically embodies the role where she's initially kind of this street person and stuff like that, and then she really cleans up, and you see like kind of it's a striking contrast, and really see it. On the other hand, as much as I actually like Brigitte Fonda for a lot of different things, I felt like it was a really stretch to show her as a street person and stuff. I mean, yeah, she, they got her dirty and stuff like that, but I mean, I just like kind of, I don't know, it's really hard to see her in that, role and stuff as being convincing and stuff. It's nothing on her acting and stuff, but just, I just didn't buy it and everything. But, ultimately, like, then it gets into the thing of then to see any more believable as an assassin. I think she did a really good job, like physically and stuff. But again, like, and I think that's one of the things we've talked about before sometimes is that, like, these actors are put into different roles and we're willing to kind of, and we want to see them stretch and stuff. But it's really hard to, like, kind of sometimes buy, like, some of these actors in these kind of roles that are really beyond, like, kind of what we know them as or know them for.
Yeah. I mean, I thought she did a pretty decent job, really.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't think she was too bad. My main complaint with the remake was the music. The music was just terrible. in that remake. Eric Serra's. It's funny, stylistically, they're very similar music soundtrack wise, but for some reason, Eric Serra's just comes off much better in Nikita.
Yeah, it's striking, like, kind of the difference where you really, like, I felt like the original kind of the music captured like kind of the feel of kind of that world and stuff, and whereas in you know, they on the downside, of course, is just like that you really didn't feel that kind of connection with the music to the story and stuff. But one thing they did do well, I thought, was like kind of reintroducing Nina Simone, which actually that's her code name in the remake and stuff. And actually, you know, there's been comments about that, how that kind of they almost credit this movie, you know, like kind of reintroducing a new generation to, you know, this singer who like is for some strange reason been largely forgotten and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, obviously in that respect, it's good. I think for me though, I'm not a fan of movies where they just have one, where they tie you to one particular artist all the way through. But it's
right.
But yeah, I mean, it made up for the bad soundtracks in the other places. So, I mean, I think as well, you know, you've got to compare you know, the style of Nikita is so much better than Point of No Return. You know, on one hand, you've got the director who was, you know, a champion of a new kind of visual style of French cinema, part of you know, the cinema du look movement. And you've got the guy who made Blue Thunder, like the 1980s kind of action show. So
right.
It's no wonder one is slightly better than the other in terms of physical style.
Yeah, I mean that's you know, I think that really says it all. Like I know what you just said though, because you know, like John Badham actually, like kind of, you know, like I actually forgot or didn't really know that he's also like, you know, known for like Saturday Night Fever, you know, War Games,
Okay.
And you know, Stakeout was the other one that kind of, as well as Dracula though. So that's actually, so we'll probably see him again like in the future.
Right. Yeah. I'm probably, I forgot that he actually did some other good movies as well. So yeah, I'm giving him a hard time.
Well, I mean, just like kind of just, it's interesting how like that those are good movies, but also like kind of it's interesting how like the visual kind of, you know, the look and feel and stuff like that are pretty much just more about the certain worlds and stuff. It's like in a way like that he doesn't seem to so much like create these worlds as opposed to just basically portray them. You know, like kind of if you look at each of them, right, like kind of just Saturday Night Fever, right? He's just creating or recreating the disco, you know, world and stuff. War Games is kind of, you know, creating this Cold War kind of, you know, bunker kind of setting and stuff like that. So, you know, I guess what I'm saying is like he's very much fine with like kind of bringing like kind of, you know, something that's like more or less made and ready to go and stuff like that. But I felt like, you know, here with La Femme Nikita, you know, Luc Besson basically creates this kind of world of like kind of the secret organization where like, you know, all these kind of intrigues are going on and stuff like that. And, you know, that's not to say that he's not really taking from a lot of other Cold War spy movies and stuff like that. Absolutely. But it's still like, I think that's one of his strengths is that like, whether it's The Fifth Element or some of these other, you know, or in the case of Leon and stuff, he creates like kind of these little worlds that like kind of that, you know, they're very much, you can have the sense that it's his fingerprint on it and stuff.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's kind of, he was very good. I'm thinking he was probably really the first good example, I would say, of reintroducing like a comic book aesthetic to movies and giving them a kind of a hyper real look. I mean, I kind of feel like Tarantino does that in a way as well. And there's a lot of like Robert Rodriguez, various other people you know, they have this kind of, you know, gritty kind of realism, but almost like a hyper realism that they bring to it.
Right.
And, you know, I feel Luc Besson was definitely one of the first to just do that.
Yeah, definitely paved the way for like, you know, the Frank Millers and the and then of course the DCU Marvel stuff that now is like kind of just very much you know, front and center and stuff. But you know, like before that, like you said, you know, that there was very few people doing that. It was a lot of about cinema verite. It's very much kind of portraying like kind of real worlds rather than creating these kind of worlds and stuff. So I definitely can see that.
Mm. Yeah. So which one did you prefer, if it's not already obvious, I guess?
I mean, to me, like, I don't even know if like it can ever be really like remade in a way that like it just will just be anything like and maybe in some ways like as we talked about with the different issues of like kind of the femininity and that kind of thing, it's maybe in a way that like there's really not going to be room for it. So but the Femme Nikita, the original, like kind of just absolutely like, kind of for me like it just the style of it really just kind of it just such a unique standalone movie and stuff like that like when I saw Point of No Return the first time, I just like really thought like like really like kind of like that's the attempt at kind of remaking it and stuff like that. I mean, I know it's for an American audience, but it just like I just felt like it was such a pale reflection of the original.
I just felt it was like Gabriel Byrne's creepy, voyeuristic, homeless martial arts school. That was kind of what I felt. Yeah, just yeah. But I mean, and we always talk about like what was the motivation. Clearly, this one is very simple. It's in English.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. I mean that's like they did kind of try to twist some things. Like I think you were kind of pointing out like kind of when we were offline stuff, but the making the boyfriend no longer be a grocer and stuff was like a really strange choice. Like kind of I mean, granted, like it created a story where then we have excuses for a photo or a montage of like him taking photos of Maggie and stuff. But other than that, like I have to agree that like I think what you're saying was how it loses some power where like here he's this kind of passive character in the original, and that's almost like kind of why she's attracted to him because of his passivity. And in this one, like we don't get that sense. Like he's just this kind of confused boyfriend and stuff. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, apparently Luc Besson really found that interesting of switching the sort of general roles, in that he wanted to make the male character much more passive,
right,
and making the female character more sort of aggressive and
yeah. I mean, I felt like that was definitely more believable. Was that like that her like making the moves and stuff like that, and because just of who not only she'd become, but even before that, like she excuse me was very much somebody who like kind of was already before her transformation was already was this kind of person who kind of just went for things and stuff, and in a way like kind of the woman who kind of transforms her kind of talks about her taking power and stuff like that, and she's by the time after the transformation she's very much like kind of just this woman who's going to basically get like if something like is in front of her that she wants, she's gonna basically go after and stuff. So yeah, it was very much convincing. I thought like kind of that would be the kind of person that she would be attracted to and kind of just basically see as like kind of yeah, he looks very much like ready to go.
A consumable item in the supermarket.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the other interesting sort of theory I came across when I was reading about this was this idea that the way the sort of the hidden meaning of violence towards women in movies is this idea that the violence enacted is directly proportional to the intended sexual interest. So you have sort of Gabriel Byrne, or actually, well, not him, but Bob as a character shooting her in the leg.
Yeah,
is kind of an unconscious cue of that. He's physically interested in her as well.
Oh, interesting.
So, and that's something I'm still trying to sort of think about other examples in movies where that might be the case, or whether that's kind of implied. But yeah, it was just an interesting thing that I will be thinking about. going forward with movies, I guess. So.
Well, certainly, like, adolescent and pre-adolescent boys have this thing of like kind of pulling on the pigtails of like the young girls, and so certainly like there's a little bit of that. I think that like, and in fact, the whole pickup community, right? Like one of the things that they talk about is this idea, like kind of
negging,
yeah, like basically poking, fun at somebody to kind of basically raising your stature, and so certainly I think that's kind of a little bit connected where it's like you're dominating the other person, and so and that's kind of the other aspect of it, that like where the belief system, where like kind of that the understandings that like the attraction comes from the fact that like the what a person is kind of cued to, or like kind of the signals, if you will, is that like a woman quote unquote wants to be dominated, and so this kind of like triggers that and stuff. So whether or not sorry,
what they really need though is a secret society, and then exploit them at the if they're really, really super vulnerable, then they have that whole game completely locked down. Yeah, I mean, I kind of I don't know, it's just me, but I kind of feel like the Bob character is a little bit like a pimp in a way.
Yeah,
I kind of I kind of feel like that's what they're sort of getting at a bit, but just for services rendered in this case are a killing.
And certainly, like that was apparently, I think they kind of mentioned it a couple times, not really like in a profound way, but just that that's why she'll do as a kind of desirable agent stuff, because her attractiveness will basically distract like kind of the targets and stuff, and we kind of see that like there's kind of certain moments that you kind of see a little bit that like in fact I remember one particular scene where one of the thugs, right, like is just kind of caught off guard that like here's this kind of petite like attractive female that like when he's like kind of searching for the bathroom or something like that for the killer, and I think he didn't realize like who was actually the killer or something like that. I mean,
she shoots him, doesn't she?
Oh yeah. But I think that was like an interesting kind of, it was like a split second though, and it did kind of come across like that they wanted to show like how she's that like somebody would typically be expecting like at least a like regular size kind of killer and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Luc Besson loves that. There's quite a few movies where I think she's in the firing range and she's like firing shots, and there's the guy who's running the firing range is sort of like open-mouthed, dumbfounded at
right.
And that reminds me also of like the scene in The Fifth Element where she kind of breaks out of her, she's just been sort of re-engineered, and she breaks out physically out of her sort of little genetic cage thing that they created her in, and they're all like there looking dumbfounded. Yeah. So it's kind of like this thing of what something so delicate and beautiful could be this violent, he loves that kind of that sort of contrast.
Yeah, and of course, with Leon the Professional, likewise with Natalie Portman in one of her first major roles, that was very much like kind of striking in the sense of where, on the one hand, you have this person who's protective of her, but yet by the second half and stuff like that, she absolutely doesn't need like protecting in the one sense where she's like very much a killing capable machine and stuff like that.
Yeah. So any further thoughts on the Femme Nikita?
Overall, I think we kind of covered the major points and stuff that like, and it does definitely kind of bear the kind of the funny question, I guess, in this case of like, why do a remake? And apparently at least one other reason why they're often done is that they got to create an English version and stuff.
Yeah. Or Luc Besson wants to just sort of film yet another sort of sexy, lithe killer girl in being manipulated by an organization for like the 10th time.
Right.
So.
I think one of the kind of, we'll just kind of briefly mention like kind of the television series. I do want to say like kind of, the one with Peta Wilson, they kind of in the first episode just do like, the basic plot line of, the movie, the original movie. And they just kind of like, just go through that and stuff. They cram it into 1 hour and stuff. and like just like the very much the whole 20 minutes or first third, the first act of the original, they basically pack into like a montage of a few minutes and stuff, and so yeah, and then they kind of the rest of it is like kind of just basically establishing her like kind of training and stuff, and then introducing this Michael character who is basically Bob, but there's like kind of they start kind of creating some differences and stuff from this first episode. Yeah.
So is that the TV show with Maggie Q, or was that different?
No. Maggie Q actually was yet another remake of the series. Like, in other words, it's yet another series just called Nikita, but same basic story. I didn't really have a chance to kind of touch that one, but it's interesting how like that one's even more like, as it seems like what happens is like, as they progressively went along, it became more about the sexiness of it, and like more about that than and in fact, like kind of apparently in the Peta Wilson series, there's this kind of tension between Michael and Nikita and stuff. So instead of like kind of where it's like more in the background in these the movie version, it's very much like kind of like this front and center kind of piece.
Yeah. It's funny because, I mean, talk about the sort of the sexiness of it. I mean, the other thing that's really noticeably different is this idea of like Bob being a voyeuristic character.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if you compare that to something like Bond, most of the time in Bond movies, most of his bosses don't even know where he is most of the time. But for some reason, with these female killers, they're constantly being sort of watched.
Yeah.
I think it was like Freud who said, even, any kind of wanting to watch anything, any movie or anything like this has a kind of inherent voyeuristic kind of quality to it.
Right.
Hence why we watch generally attractive movie stars, I think, because there is like this kind of inherent voyeuristic sort of element, which makes you sort of wonder, is it worth criticizing movies for their superficiality when even the act of wanting to go and watch a movie has some kind of voyeuristic level to it. It's one of those things I kind of think, that's why this all kind of feels like a bit silly trying to argue it either way.
I feel like that when we look for a reason and stuff, right, it's like kind of this idea that like we act on emotion, but we explain away with logic and stuff. And I feel like that's kind of what we're doing, like justifying why we saw like kind of this movie that like has really like very little like actual intellectual kind of justification, but but we have to like kind of discuss it in detail and stuff, so then that way it justifies like why we decide to go see it.
Absolutely. It's okay to watch people being butchered with a chainsaw if I know the real underlying theme of it.
Right. So one series that I definitely want to kind of cover after this is like as we kind of mentioned, Pygmalion, My Fair Lady, because I definitely feel like there's a lot of kind of parallels between these, and definitely it'll be interesting to kind of get into the kind of the feminist issues now, like kind of with that different lens. And I guess in some ways, Pretty Woman, as I kind of mentioned, like that's yet another one that kind of has this same basic element of having a woman that needs to be saved and fixed, I guess, and stuff by a male, father figure and stuff. So.
Yeah, and I could be wrong, but I think that's a remake, isn't it, of a French movie?
Oh,
I think it is.
Okay, I mean, I could definitely see that and stuff. But what's funny is that like that it's in spite of that then that's the movie that now is so often referenced when like kind of they have this kind of trope of like hooker with a heart of gold. It's basically referencing that movie and stuff, like, so it's funny how that became like kind of not quite the original, but like kind of the gold standard, I guess, if you will.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's so pervasive that when people reference these kind of stories. No, definitely we'll have to delve into that some more. And of course, try and find as many parallels with Disney princesses as possible.
Yes.
Because that's always quite interesting for me.
Super. So as always, be sure to like and subscribe. And as always, I'm John Chang with Dan Edmonds. And
Thanks very much.
See you next time.